Good morning and welcome to the program, The Roundtable. My name is Issa Nu. Today we are going to be looking at how we can deepen democracy as we move towards the campaign season and also the 2023 general election. And as you know, campaign is very, very important to every political party, most especially here in Nigeria, where we conduct election every 4 years. So the campaign is that particular time where you see politicians going out to roll out their programs and then their policies when they assume leadership if they win. But then, while the Global Commission report on strengthening democracy provides intuitive recommendations on tactics for refining electoral reliability, we need to remember that elections are just one step in the democratic process. Certain initiators need to be made right in order to make the report recommended strategic achievable. Having lived in Nigeria and experienced the democratic process here, I'm of the opinion that one vital measure needed to strengthen its democracy is to drastically reduce the excessive financial incentives that accompany political positions. The quest for political leadership must be guided by a passion to lead and make changes. Sadly, these are noble incentives overshadowed by the what is in for me mentality of personal gratification that has eaten deep into the fabric of the country's political space. Concerns have been raised about the conduct of the coming campaigns by political parties ahead of the 2023 general elections. And according to INEC timetable and schedule for activities for the poll, open campaigns commence on 28th of September this year. However, ahead of the exercise, the electoral body will publish the final list of candidates for the presidential and National Assembly seats on 20th of September. So while we await the list of the candidates and commencement of our campaigns, our discussions today will focus on deepening democracy, issue-based political campaigns, and the concerns of Nigerians towards the 2023 general election. And to discuss that this morning with me is the vice presidential candidate of the African Democratic Congress in person of Mr. Ahmed Buhari, and then Mr. Abdul Amadu will be joining us via Skype, and hopefully we'll also have Mr. Adeboye Adebayo, who is the head of media of one of the political campaign group. So while you stay tuned at home, we expect you to also keep to our discussion. At a particular point in time, we'll definitely put it up for you to also join the program by calling in. So let's go on this short break, and when we return, we'll start up with the conversation.
Mr. President, last Saturday, the country which I have the honor to represent, the Federation of Nigeria, became independent and assumed the rights and the responsibilities of a sovereign state. Today, Nigeria has been admitted into the United Nations organization and assumes still more responsibilities. I wish to make our position plain beyond any matter of doubt as regards the African continent. We in Nigeria appreciate the advantages which the size of our country and of its population give us, but we have absolutely no aggressive intentions. We shall never impose ourselves upon any other country and shall treat every African territory, big or small, as our equal, because we honestly feel that it is only on that basis of equality that peace can be maintained in our continent. We in Nigeria are a populous country. There are about 40 million of us, and our territory is relatively large. We are willing to learn before we rush into the field of international politics. But we are totally unwilling to be diverted from the ideals which we think true. That is the reason, Mr. President, why we in Nigeria shall not be found to align ourselves as a matter of routine with any particular bloc. Indeed, I hate the very idea of blocs existing at all in the United Nations. It seems to me to be a contradiction in terms. When we hear the world crying out for peace, we may receive the inspiration to deal with these intractable problems and be able really to devote all our resources to the advancement of mankind by applying those eternal truths which will inevitably persist long after we ourselves are utterly forgotten. Thank you, Mr. President.
Welcome back, and here with me in the studio is Mr. Ahmed Buhari. Good morning and welcome to the program, The Roundtable.
Good morning, it's good to be here.
It's nice having you this morning with the recent happenings in the political scene.
Yeah.
And you know, definitely issues that has to do with campaign will definitely come with so much pressure for political parties. How is your party faring? Because I know your party of recent had an issue. I don't know how far you've gone in resolving that issue.
Thanks. Thank you for having me. We still have the issues, unfortunately, but it is my firm belief as well that there's no how something that is great would not attract some of this kind of impediments, you know, where people will come around to see that they distort the process towards your success. The African Democratic Congress is going to be turning 20 next year. So it's not a new party, it's an old party. And one of the biggest concerns we have is an issue that emanated from the state chairman, who were upset that the national chairman failed to follow the constitution of the party and removed one of their colleagues, talking about the state chairman of Abia State. And they came up with a resolution that they need the party to address the situation of reinstating its state chairman. And so they were calling on the national chairman, who had forcefully removed their colleague, to reinstate him, following and respecting the constitution. I think in the process, they demanded for two things. One was giving him a 24-hour mandatory requirement to put back their colleague, and the second part was to remind the National Working Committee as well that their tenure would elapse in August. And so they should be planning towards a national elective convention where new National Working Committee members would be elected. And from nowhere, the national chairman, who started fidgeting, decided to quickly put together a kangaroo convention, a neck meeting, so to speak, where he invited only people who he felt he was comfortable with, and those he felt were against him were not invited. And so during that meeting that they held, they quickly said to themselves that they were going to give a tenure allocation of 1 year to themselves. Constitutionally, that is not acceptable, because this was happening a few days after their tenure had elapsed. Their tenure elapsed on the 21st of August. They had this meeting on the 25th of August. By the law, they were no longer National Working Committee members. But, you know, so that there's no void in a party structure, you are expected to now use the Board of Trustees to intercede to ensure that an interim system is put in place that would work towards that national convention. But obviously, the national chairman, or should I call it the former national chairman, did not want to move, and so quickly put together that process that gave himself a tenure allegation. So clearly, what is happening is people within the party, like the presidential candidate, Mr. Dumebi Kachiku, is saying, no, why do you have to do this? Why don't you respect the Constitution? I'm here because of the Constitution. I know that you have been chairman of this party for 17 years, which by the Constitution also is illegal. I would expect that you would be willing to step aside and let the right thing be done. We already promised you that we're going to give you a good send forth and absorb you into the Board of Trustees. That's a good place for somebody who has served the party for that long to be. But the chairman, the former chairman, I think, insists he wants to be a lifetime chairman, and that is not possible. And even if you want to be a lifetime chairman, present yourself for another election. If the people want to see you return to office, they would vote you back in office. If you do not want to see you return to office, they won't vote you back in office. So in a nutshell, when members of the party now insisted that a real convention should take place where elective officers should be returned back in office, the former national chairman and some of his colleagues who are also expired National Working Committee members now said, you have been suspended. And they felt that was going to make him quiver and say, oh, I'm sorry. But he refused to deter, and he said, I'm still going to make sure that you people do the right thing. A national convention has to be held, and you people would have to vacate that space. And they say, you have been expelled. So again, this is what happens in the big stage. We're running a country where people are failing to follow the law, respect the law. And if you look at it critically, once we're able to follow the law or respect the law, all of these little problems we have around our country will not be there. Clearly, the former national chairman and the former national working committee are disrespecting the constitution that holds the party together. And for us, knowing fully well that this is what people do when they are planning to either go and deal the party during elections to bigger parties, because that's what most small parties do. They will actually make it look like they're actually running, and then when it's almost time, you just hear we've endorsed a bigger party, and then everybody will be looking. But indeed, money must have exchanged hands. And then now you're having a presidential candidate who's saying, I'm not going to deal. I want to run the race. I'm going to finish this race. And I'm not interested in whatever discussions you guys had prior with other bigger parties. We are running this race to the end. For that reason, he's a bad guy. For that reason, he has to leave the space, because for them, this is what they used to eat.
Could that be a major fallout as a result of the primaries that were conducted for your presidential candidate to emerge? That's the person that's probably having the problem now, Dumebi Kashiku. Because I remember during your party primary, he contested with Kingsley Moghalu, and after that, there were so many issues. And you know, democracy is very beautiful. You have opportunity to always come back to readdress issues. So is it possible that the problem your party is having could be as a result of the primary it earlier conducted?
What I just explained to you clearly has no business with the primaries. The primaries was a very transparent primaries. You know, it was transparent, it was clean, it was clear. The only thing that happened during the primaries was the fact that this same national chairman had called Dumebi Kachiku to say to him, if you want us to give you this thing without any hassles, we could manipulate the process and give it to you. And he turned it down, and he said he was not going to do it. However, it is obvious that the national chairman has not seen any way he's going to extort money from people, and that is why he's trying to deal to an external body, so to speak. And it wasn't just Kingsley Moghalu that contested in that primaries. There were other people. There were about 7 credible people that contested in that primaries, and maybe emerged the victorious one. And you see, I always like to make people understand something. My friend used to say, if it's a basketball match, you can bounce the ball with your hand. But if you go to a football pitch and you touch the ball with your hand, it's foul. That means wherever you find yourself, understand that the game changes. If it is politics, you cannot expect to go into politics and recite, books to the people. People don't listen to those things. People want to hear you or see you play the politics. And for Dumebi Kachiku, what I think he did differently was when he agreed to be part of the African Democratic Congress, you will find him at the party office. You will see him sit with the people in the office. You will see him sit with the National Working Committee. You will see him sit with people who were going to become delegates. And in most cases, you will see something like, maybe we'll say, where do you live? I like you. Where do you live? Also, I live in so place. Let's go. I saw a man who said he's the state chairman of a particular state, Benue State. He said, do you know that this man allowed me enter his car? I entered his car and I drove with him somewhere, and we went to have lunch. The point is, people want you to come to their level. They want to feel you. They do not want you to look like you're bigger than them or larger than life. In truth, he was able to connect with them, and that is why he emerged on that day. And many people would think otherwise, but in truth, the situation that we have right now has no business to do with the primaries. The primaries happened a few months ago. Now we're talking about a situation where the National Working Committee's tenure has expired. And what we're saying is respect the Constitution. Just the way Dumebi Kachiku went through a primaries, you also come here and have an election so that you might emerge if the people want you. Otherwise, you vacate the space for someone else. Do not forget, a political party is not anybody's property. It is the collective property of all of those people that have contributed to the existence of the party, whether by dues or by association. So people must dissociate that from their minds that, because I was here first, it belongs to me. No. For a political party as such, it is for all the members. Every member in the party is important. And you can't even suspend a member of the party without first making it start from its local constituency. So the ward where you register happens to be the place where exactly you can function, you can be removed or suspended from. Any other thing that you do will be the vote of the Constitution as it stands with the African Democratic Congress.
So what is now the fate of your political party with respect to INEC releasing the list for the 2023 general election?
As it stands, everybody who was emerged as a candidate in their political parties cannot be removed. Even if any of them decides that he doesn't want to run, that is his business. His name is still going to be on the ballots. So again, when you hear things like this from the former national chairman, it becomes laughable. Like, how do you expel or how do you remove a candidate that is already recognized by INEC and by law? So they're called political statements that are meant to either make you shake or create confusion or make you chicken out of the situation because you feel they have overpowered you. In reality of things, as I speak with you, the matter is a court, because we would have to get the National Working Committee, former National Working Committee, do the right thing, which is, subject themselves to the constitution of the party.
Democracy, they say, is very, very interesting, most especially to politicians who go out to campaign. Campaign door is going to open 28th of September.
Right.
Now, when you look at the campaign period, it is a period that is full with so many uncertainties. You don't know what your opposition is going to say. You don't know what the main party is going to say. Now, if we move towards the campaign period, and issues-based campaign is very, very important, most especially at this particular point in time, what should be the major driving force for political parties?
I think the major driving force for political parties and for the electorate as well is to pay attention to the issues. What are your solutions? What are you bringing to the table? One thing I've noticed with many people that have already presented themselves for the campaign is, there is no power. There is no electricity. If you go through the roads are bad. We cannot stand this. We have to move from a consumer economy to a producing economy. We would have to ensure that our planes are working. At the end of the day, you have just reiterated the things that Nigerians already know. What are you going to do differently? So Nigerians should not be carried away by the mere fact that somebody is saying something that they already know. In fact, I'll give you an example. When you listen to a sermon, either an imam or a pastor preaching, in the church or in the mosque, and they're saying things that you already know, you keep nodding like, this makes a lot of sense. You already know that. The only time that you really stop for a minute to actually focus is when you're hearing something you have never heard before, which is why my appeal to the electorate especially is to demand solutions from candidates, not mere words of incitement that can anger the people or to remind them of their sufferings and say, it is either APC or PDP that have put us in this for so long and they are the problem. Fine and good. These Siamese twins have been the problem for a long time. But what are we going to do differently? What are we bringing to the table? And that is why for the African Democratic Congress, the one thing that we hold so dear to our heart is how we can make sure that the Patriot Act gets accepted into law. What is the Patriot Act? Dubembe Kachiko and I have, in the last few months, tried to make Nigerians understand that there's no way we're going to solve the problems of Nigerians if we're not going to compel government officials and beneficiaries of government contracts to the use of the facilities within the country. So, for example, if you're a government official, your children have to use Nigerian government schools. If you're a government official, you have to use our roads. If you're a government official, you have to be seen in our national hospitals. If you're a government official, there is no how you're going to be telling us that you're not going to use the roads because there's a train. Or, for example, if there's a train, I cannot use the train because I'm scared. Bandits might attack, so I'm going to use the plane. I mean, when the train was still working, you would find generals where their escorts will bring them to the train station in Kaduna, and then the general and two other men will enter the train, and then the rest of the boys will follow the road and drive down to Abuja to receive the Oga. This should not happen if you want the system to work. So the Patriot Act insists on all of these things to happen. But then someone would ask me, how will this happen? After all, these guys have money to afford all of these things. If you do not want this to happen, then you do not have to be in the system. You can decide not to have a government contract. You can decide not to work for government. You can decide not to be a politician, because if you become any of this, the law compels you to use these facilities. There is no how. I remember when I was going to school when I was a kid. In my class, we had people whose parents were governors, ministers, whose parents were permanent secretaries. You knew you knew their parents were very wealthy or very recognizable people in the society, but it didn't matter. They were in the same class with you, so the class was working. So the school was working. As I speak with you right now, people still bring in generators, even though they are actually palm sex at the Ministry of Power. That is laughable. It's a shame. It means that he's not going to be thinking of anything to do to fix the system. It's the same thing with the schools that have been shut down for about 8 months now. You've shut down schools for about 8 months now as a result of all of the nonsense that is going on. But what do you expect? In the real sense of things, these people will not be in a hurry to fix the situation in our school situation, because most of their kids are actually graduated from Cambridge and Oxford.
So
as I speak with you.
So invariably, if your party now, for instance, is going to campaign ground from September 28th, there are definitely so many things you have to tell Nigerians for Nigerians to vote your party. But then you also know the hustle toggles of politicians. You say something today and then you do something differently, based on probably maybe the system you never expected to see.
Right.
So now, if we are to move forward now as a nation, and then we look at all the elections being conducted or recent by INEC, what is your assessment based on this same umpire that is going to lead the 2023 general election?
You know, INEC, people really call out INEC all the time, but who's INEC? It's just us. It's the same Nigerian people. You understand? INEC staff altogether are not up to 10,000 people. So during elections, there are ad hoc staff that come in. There are corpers, there are professors from Nigerian universities, there are lecturers that support the ad hoc system to ensure that they have enough manpower to make this happen. We've seen those people also become part of the problem. We've seen those people become fraudulent at the face of presenting the people with what can actually rescue us from our problems. In other words, it means that if we want these things to happen differently, we also have to change ourselves. We also have to start looking at ourselves differently and saying, if the actions I take today are good, I know that it will happen positive for us in future. If they're negative, there's going to be negativity in future. And that is why when we talk about this, we keep saying one of the things that's going to solve our problems is if we look at who are the gatekeepers. Who are the gatekeepers? The civil servants, the public servants, the military, the paramilitary. And every time I see these people complain about salary, our salary is too low, we're not well paid, this is why we're not happy with how things are happening. That's why I even steal. That is why I even dip my hand into the public coffers. This is why, as a civil servant, I'm telling you who has come to ask for a contract to mark it up by 120%, because I know that 60% comes to me and my boys. We would have to relook at all of these things and ensure that there's a welfare system that's put in place. What's a welfare system? A welfare system is what looks at the things that these civil servants need, the things that these military men need. What do they need? They need affordable housing. They need good health care. They need school fees for their children. Affordable school fees affordable schooling for their children. What else do they need? They need money in their hands. And so when you ask for, I want 30% increment in my salary, the market woman is already hearing you. By the time you get your 30% and you hit the market, if she was selling the mudu of gari before for 100 naira, she starts selling it at 130 naira, and then you'll be like, so my 30% is not even going to make any difference now. And then for those people who do not even have the 30% increment, they are now talking about higher level of inflation. So what are we doing? Instead of talking about this salary increment, why don't we talk about welfare structure? Improve welfare, so that the day I get into the civil service, I know that my housing is secured. All through my 35 years of service, I'm going to be getting some small deductions to ensure that I have a house that I can put my head under. For many civil servants, they get into the civil service structure knowing that there's no plan for them for that, and they start stealing from day one. What is the next thing? We're worrying about our health care. You go to the civil service structure today. As you're entering the ministry, you are seeing photocopied pictures on the wall. Help Mr. Obina Moazu. He needs 500,000 naira for his operation. The next time you come, maybe a month later, obituary, Mr. Obina Moazu died, his burial arrangements. The truth is, there's nothing in place to make sure that all of these people are protected. And so that's love.
So invariably, are you saying that our institutions are still not got into that utopia where they can work without major...
In truth, I was able to dig back to where this whole problem is starting from. In 1976, there was a mass retrenchment of the civil service structure after the war. So people who had served for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, people who were expecting pension and all of that, were abruptly removed from the service. You know what that did? That removed the trust and the love that people truly have for the country. They stopped believing that the country would intercede for them in their time of need. So people who came to the civil service structure after that exercise now say, I need to put my own together before something happens to me. So we need to improve the trust that people who are working for government have for the government that they're working for. That is the only way you can start loving your country. I'll give you an example. An American comes to this country and you get into a fight with him in the market square. He reminds you, say, I'm an American. He's saying that because he knows that if you touch him, it doesn't take up to 24 hours. We saw how an American was kidnapped in Niger State. It took less than 24 hours. The Americans came and picked him out.
But then we've also seen Nigerian army also doing the same in so many instances. As
I speak with you right now, the people who were kidnapped from the train station are being removed every day from who were kidnapped from that infiltrated train situation. They are only coming out of that situation because their families are putting money together to get them out.
But then we've also seen the government also doing one. But then, before we continue with this discussion, we'll also go for just a break. And then when we return back, we'll also have one of our guests who will also be joining us to continue with our conversation this morning on how we can make sure, yes, we have a better system for our democracy.
We are a nation blessed with people of diverse cultures, religions, languages, and opinions. It is ironic that we are now being ripped apart by our greatest strength, our diversity. We have allowed intolerance, insensitivity, bigotry, and nepotism to blind our vision of the greatness we can achieve working together as one. We may not have the same culture, nor religion, nor language, but we all belong to the same nation by the divine will of God. We did not choose to be Nigerians. Nigeria chose us. This nation is our divine heritage, and if we open our eyes, we would realize that what divides us pales in comparison to what unites us. And by the comparison and conciliation of our differences, we will grow until our differences disappear. Our unity cannot be wielded by mere declarations, nor do we get unity by ignoring the questions that beg for answers. We must celebrate our diversity and debate our differences without fracturing our unity. Our strength is not in our numbers, but in our unity, because even the weak become strong when united. Nigeria unite. This message is brought to you by Abuja Broadcasting Corporation, owners and operators of ASO Radio 93.5 FM.
Mr. President, last Saturday, the country which I have the honor to represent, the Federation of Nigeria, became independent and assumed the rights and the responsibilities of a sovereign state. Today, Nigeria has been admitted into the United Nations organization and assumes still more responsibilities. I wish to make our position plain beyond any matter of doubt as regards the African continent. We in Nigeria appreciate the advantages which the size of our country and of its population give us, but we have absolutely no aggressive intentions. We shall never impose ourselves upon any other country and shall treat every African territory, big or small, as our equal, because we honestly feel that it is only on that basis of equality that peace can be maintained in our continent. We in Nigeria are a populous country. There are about 40 million of us, and our territory is relatively large. We are willing to learn before we rush into the field of international politics. But We are totally unwilling to be diverted from the ideals which we think true. That is the reason, Mr. President, why we in Nigeria shall not be found to align ourselves as a matter of routine with any particular bloc. Indeed, I hate the very idea of blocs existing at all in the United Nations. It seems to me to be a contradiction in terms. When we hear the world crying out for peace, we may receive the inspiration to deal with these intractable problems and be able really to devote all our resources to the advancement of mankind by applying those eternal truths which will inevitably persist long after we ourselves are utterly forgotten. Thank you, Mr. President.
Welcome back, and yeah, in the studio now is Mr. Adeboye. Good morning and welcome to the program.
Thank you, Mr.
Unfortunately, you had a traffic issue and you couldn't meet up with time.
That was terrible.
But then, we've been discussing with Mr. Ahmed Buhari, who is the vice presidential candidate of the ADC. Looking at our political terrain now, the issue of democracy is once again at our front, coming to campaign period towards the 2023 general election. What is your general assessment with your party progress with respect to their preparation?
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, viewers. Let me start by saying that in the last 23 years, we must commend ourselves, going by the incursion of the military, into the democratic process, currently happening in some countries in Nigeria. But in our own case, in the last 23 years, we've been able, to reduce the military to the background, to their level of, protecting the territorial integrity of the nation. We should commend ourselves on that one. Then secondly, we should commend ourselves that in the last 23 years that we have this democratic process on, there have been so much development. Yes, there are skirmishes around here and there, but infrastructural wise, we have done well. So in terms of democracy, deepening of democracy in Nigeria, a lot of things have been done. You will recall that when President Muhammadu Buhari came on board, he promised the country that he will not interfere with any of the electoral processes, and he has kept his promises by not interfering in any of the electoral process in the country. In so many elections, these by-elections that have been, that has taken place, during this process, he never interfered with any one of them. You will recall that at the beginning of this dispensation, of this republic, we have a situation whereby governors were being removed by state house assembly, without following the proper process. But in the last few years now, such thing has never taken place. So which means democracy is gradually taking its deep root in the sustainability of Nigeria. So we have really done well, here and there.
Okay. Now looking at our current system, and then looking at the campaign period, the window will be open from 28th of September. And what do you think political parties should face more with respect to their discussion while they are doing their campaign?
Yes. What we really need now, over the years, leadership has become an issue in Nigeria, and then the recruitment process, we need to look into that. We need to identify leaders who can take us from where we are to the next level. The basic things we need now in this country is a leader that can create wealth. We have abundance of wealth on the ground, human capital development. We need a leader, that can come together to harness all these resources, human resources, mineral resources, natural resources, that can harness all of these resources together, that can coordinate them together, and create wealth with them for the economic benefit of Nigerians. So we need a leader, that understands the nitty-gritty of Nigerian problem, they understand where we are, they understand where we are coming from, and that will lead us to where we are going. So we need a leader in that regard that has the capacity, the experience, the precedence, to lead the country aright in terms of economy, because some of the issues that we're having today, unemployment issue, all of them are related to economy. It's only because the economy is not there, it's not working well. If we have a leader that can galvanize all these resources we have together and, coordinate them to improve on the life of people by creating wealth, employment and all of those things will be created, and the life of the people will be improved. And as a result, this issue of insecurity, unemployment every now and then will be reduced to be barest minimum.
Okay.
So we need a leader, that can really lead with experience, with precedence, and antecedent. Because we need experienced leader in this country today. Nigeria is so complex that it can only be governed, by an experienced leader.
Okay. Let me quickly go back to Mr. Ahmed Buhari. Now you were once a presidential aspirant, and now you are a vice presidential candidate for the ADC. Why that twist from 2019 to 2023? That change in terms of your cadre, being an aspirant to a vice presidential candidate?
Well, I was a presidential candidate in the 2019 election, and anybody who listened to me very carefully in that election area, I said very clearly that I believe that 2023 a southern president should emerge, and if I had said that, it didn't make any sense for me to still present myself to be running for office of the president. But be that as it may, I got about 3 different offers from different presidential candidates who wanted me to be their running mates. I know I turned down a few, and eventually I accepted to run with Umebika Chiku. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do so was because I felt he needed the support that he can get from what I have gained from the field, and see how we can support him moving forward. And I did listen to my colleague here who have spoken very vehemently about a leader who has competence, who has capacity, who has got some experience. I believe those are the things that we really need to actually push the country forward, to be honest, with regards to ensuring that we get the right people in office. But I also want to remind everybody that's listening that the experience required for good leadership does not have to be earned through a political process. In other words, we've had a lot of people who have come with so much experience from the political space, who we know that based on their track record, the only thing that we have seen them do is actually destroy. And when I mean destroy, we haven't quite seen people who you would say, oh, he was formerly in this space and he left it as an amazing space. Because at the end of the day, what do the people really need? And I spoke to you earlier before he came in. I said we need welfare. We need something better for ourselves. We need a space where, as a civil servant, for example, and I keep making reference to the civil service structure.
Yes.
And the reason why I'm doing that is because these are the people that would ensure that all the mago that happens in this country will stop. Because at the end of the day, they know that the more you steal money from the system, it affects their ability for them to get the welfare that they need to live a good life. And if they are comfortable, they will not allow anybody to destroy the system. The same way, I'm talking about the man in Sambisa Forest who gets to speak to his wife after 2 months. And, honey, how are you? I'm fine. I've not been able to speak to you for 2 months because we've been fighting the terrorists. How is Junior? He's at home. Why is he not in school? They chased them out of school because of school fees. A man at the front line? ASU strike has held for about 8 months now. What is ASU asking for? 220 billion naira to solve their problems. When the airline said they were going to shut down, because of course people like his ogas know that this is the only means of transportation, because if it gets shut down they can't move anymore. What did they do? They immediately released 110 billion, half of that money, to the airline operators. That means the money is even there. That means they'll only give the money to where their priority lies. What are we saying in essence? We're saying that any system that has to work, they would have to have educated people. We would have to educate our children. Our children cannot be pushed out of the space and say we are trying to build a country that will be successful. It cannot succeed. We cannot succeed, because the first thing that you want are people that are even ready to listen to you. How do you get them to listen to you? They have to be educated. They have to be skilled. They have to be prepared to face the challenges of life. As we're speaking right now, we already have a vacuum. A vacuum is being created because we're unable to pass this baton from one generation to the next generation at the right time.
Okay, let's take this caller. Hello, good morning. Hello, good morning. Okay, please, are we on to Abdul Amadou?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, it's nice having you, Mr. Abdul, for joining us on this program. That's the roundtable this morning. We've been discussing issues that has to do with the political terrain, and most especially with the campaign coming up from 28th of this month. What is your take with respect to how we can deepen democracy using this election period?
Well, there are quite a number of things that we can. First, the security agency must maintain their neutrality. They must maintain their neutrality. They must not in their dealings. They must understand that they're loyal to the joint states, not to the government. That's one. The Independent Electoral Commission must continue to innovate and bring ideas and strategies that will help in the president and enhance the transparency and credibility of the election. The National Assembly will soon be confirming new electoral identification that will be. Now, the National Assembly must know that the trust of the nation and the actors, the appointees, the nominees for the president that will be brought to them. If there are any one of them, any inclination also that the National Assembly must do not to confirm them. Okay?
Yes, I'm listening.
Part of the electorate, we must know, we must take it upon ourselves, we must know that we are the employer of these institutions. The powers lie in us. We employ them, they employ us. We must take very seriously. We must come out to vote on the days of the election. We're very confident we must have our choices. Our choices should be less of political parties and more of individuals. Look at the capacity of individuals in a contested. Every political party made their contest. And we must insist that the contestants must come out and talk to them. We must engage the electorate. We must engage the media. We must know what they have in mind. We must know what they want to do for us and ensure that we hold them accountable after whoever we choose to have been elected. Yes.
Okay, you raised the issue that has to do with INEC, and if you listen or if you've been following our program since we commenced this morning, the issue of INEC is very, very critical to deepening of democracy. And you've also noticed that INEC recently conducted some elections. And what is your take with respect to the conduct of the election so far?
We must give it to INEC. They've been on every election. Yes, even the contestants are increasingly accepting the outcome of elections. I mean, we were having more cases of accepting the results, the credibility of the results now than it was in the past. So I commend INEC. And that's why INEC choose consolidate on the topic. People are beginning to trust INEC. The politicians are beginning to trust INEC. Those who are not trusting INEC are those who believe in the old school strategies of rigging elections. But the majority, genuine Democrats are beginning to trust INEC and the capacity of INEC. So INEC must not waver. It must not, come down the high standard that they've built to. They only build on it by ensuring that all the comfort with the standard that is unique for themselves and the goals that is set for themselves. Any partisan irrespective of the opposition, to take a point, must have credibility, must not be tainted with any form of corruption, and they should continue to embrace technology. That's the direction.
Okay. Lastly, before you go, let me quickly ask. Now that the campaign window is about to open, and you also know that definitely politicians have their way sometimes around some of the electorate. What will be your advice to the electorate with regards to how they receive politicians' programs, policies, and then their campaign wordings and the rest of it?
First, we must insist that these politicians engage us. We should reject the tendency of advisors and supporters coming to campaign on behalf of politicians. The politicians must engage Nigerians, must come out and tell Nigerians what they intend to do for us. And even when they come out and tell us what they intend to do for us, we must interrogate them. We must engage them. For instance, if you come and you think you're going to create 1 million jobs in the first 1 year, please, we must engage such a person as how do you intend to create these jobs? When they come to campaign, when they come for rallies, we must engage them. We must avoid the tendency of, this guy is coming to just come lot over us and lecture us and sing beautiful songs and leave. We must engage them, and we also challenge the media. The media must play their role. They must engage these politicians. They should be called to the studio. They should be called out, not their spokesmen. Not their spokesmen. We have no business. We are not electing the spokesmen of politicians. We are electing the flag bearers. So let's get the flag bearers to come to the studio or whatever location they be and ask them appropriate questions and interrogate their responses.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Abdul Amadu, for joining us this morning on the Roundtable program. Let me quickly come back to Ahmed Buhari before I move to Mr. Adeboye. Now you've listened to him. You are one of the politicians. The issue of issue-based, you know how sometimes to cajole electorates to vote for you. As you move into this campaign season, what are the major things you think you need to tell the electorate for them to be law-abiding towards the 2020 general election?
Well, it's not a do-or-die affair. At the end of the day, myself and Mr. Adeboye are going to leave here shaking our hands. It means that politicians are not going to kill themselves because they're actually on a race to the top. But most importantly, I want Nigerians to understand that every single person trying to make Nigeria work is doing it with all sincerity. But the most important part is, have you got what it takes to actually get us out of where we are? What are the antecedents of those people? And like he said very clearly, we need to engage politicians. I mean, even the media should be prepared with, okay, I've seen your manifesto, I've heard you speak about certain points, and we've been able to, punch holes into that, your plan, because we know that it can't work. How do you want it to work? Please explain better to us. Not just say those things that we've just become sensational political statements that everybody's going to be excited about. How about you come here now and tell us how bit by bit you want to achieve all of those things you want to achieve, and then we'll start building up momentum towards you. But if it's going to be based on sensationalization, if it's going to be based on, he has been there for so long and that is why we want him to be there, I do not think that Nigeria is where we really want it to be. We believe that Nigeria can be better than what it is. So when you tell us that, this person has been there before, so it needs to continue, it gives me, people like myself, skepticism about whether that person indeed can give us where, or take us to where we want him to take us to.
Okay, let me quickly come back. Mr. Adeboye, now we are about rounding up the program, and what will be your final take? And you knowing that the fact that your party is on the seat, and your party will also contest for the 2023 general election. What is your final take to Nigerians with regards to the election as we move into it?
Okay, thank you. to Nigerians, we need to take, like my colleague here said, we need to take this issue of Nigeria beyond the sensational issues. We need to be factual, with facts. APC as a party, in the last 7.5 years or thereabout, we've been able to move the country from where we used to be, to another level now. In this area of look at what is happening in the Northeast now. So we can only build on that, to improve our security. And then our candidate that is coming now after President Muhammadu Buhari, by God's grace, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, is the most competent man.
Well, this is not the time for campaign.
It's not about campaign. What I'm saying is that Nigeria factually need a leader, that is above board in the corporate world, in politics, a bridge builder, beyond religion, beyond ethnicity.
Okay.
So, which means Nigeria's electorate, needs to look towards a leader that is above board in all of those areas.
Okay,
thank you. Thank
you so much, Mr. Adeboye. It's nice having you on the program again, on the roundtable. And Mr. Ahmed Buhari, thank you once more for coming. And we hope to have more of you when the campaign season finally comes. So now, this is how far we can go today on the roundtable program. My name is Isanu. Have a wonderful day and stay blessed.